Hello, 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 and welcome to tonight's show. Yes, it's a little bit different from normal. There's no live play of me playing any kind of solo games tonight because there won't be a show for the next 3 weeks. I will be off at D&D in a castle, running 2 back-to-back mini campaigns. So tonight I thought, you know what? Let's just hang out and chat. So this is entirely on you as to how interesting the conversation is going to be. So firstly, a huge thank you to Dr. Pietro Binkman for that $5 donation. A massive thank you to you. And you running your first D&D game, that's on you. That's all you're doing. I might have given you a prompt or a nudge or just a little bit of encouragement, but you've done the rest. You've actually started that D&D campaign, and how fantastic is it? Let us know how it's going and what the basic premise is, if you want to share, of course. And for those of you that are on tornado watches or warnings or things like that, yes, hopefully it all passes by and everything is all good and safe. So there we are. Right, I did a poll on the community chat. What should we talk about tonight? And for a while it seemed to be that it was just going to be on what I've got planned for D&D in a castle. And there was a little bit of rumblings as to talking about terrain and role-playing as well. And that gained popularity towards the end of the poll. So we're going to be talking ostensibly about that for a little bit. But please, if you have any kind of questions, just put the word question in caps in front of your question and drop it into chat. And we'll take it from there. Because I can only answer or talk about things that you tell me to talk about, or prompt, or suggest. And so that's what we're going to do. Right, so jumping straight into it, D&D in a Castle, for those of you that don't know anything about D&D in a Castle, it now happens in the US as well as in the UK. And what it is a 5-day event where you role play for 3 days solid. You get 24 hours of role playing with a GM of your choice that is attending the castle. And they usually get some pretty amazing GMs to come in. B. Dave Walters, Mark Meir, Elsa Teague, Ginny D, the 3 Black Halflings, Nerdarchy, just the list goes on and on and on and on, and some amazing GMs get together and you play D&D for 3 days in a castle. Now, of course, in the US, in Utah, there are quite a few castles, as a matter of fact, so they're also holding events there. And if you head on over to our discord.gg/greatgm Discord channel, there's actually a poll that's been posted up by Spike, who's trying to lobby to get D&D in a Castle to go to San Francisco and to have a San Francisco event, which could be a lot of fun. So if you haven't cast your name onto that ballot, then by all means do so. The events are fairly pricey, at least coming to the UK it is, because you're staying in a 4-star hotel, getting all of your food and meals and things paid for. Of course, the US, the prices are different. So there we are. And D&D in a Castle should be done in the only castle in the state of Kentucky, just outside of Lexington, says Steve C. Well, you know, they're always looking for castles. Now, here's an interesting little tidbit for you. Most castles do not have accommodation for 76 people. They just don't. They weren't designed for it. The castle itself, of what we think of as a castle, and which most still survive to this day as hotels and things, is actually the keep. The castle proper, with the outer walls and baileys and the usual accommodation, just isn't there anymore. So finding castles that can accommodate up to 100 people can be very, very tricky. Anyway, so what have I got planned for the D&D in a Castle folk? Well, hopefully none of you are watching, because I don't want to give away any spoilers. But I've got planned something that I did at the last D&D in a Castle, as a matter of fact. I had a lot of fun running it. And this is based on my principle of you as the GM, you are responsible for creating a situation and then running your world in accordance to the rules of your world. So, the game that my wonderful players are going to find themselves in starts with a volcanic eruption. that is going to... Oh, I beg your pardon. Well, there's the volcanic eruption right now. It's going to start with a volcanic eruption, which is going to cause a tremendous amount of damage. And ostensibly, the party is hired to investigate what caused this volcanic explosion. And depending on what they do, where they go, how they go about it, they could find out all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Suffice it to say that a lot of the decision making as to what goes into these events is pretty much what we have access to. So D&D Castle's got a huge array of minis and all those kinds of things, which we can draw on. I have a wooden sailing ship, which I often ascribe to the player party so they can use my nautical campaign rules if they want to. It's always voluntary. And it's just a lot of fun. In the last game, we had a aquatic Tarrasque, which chased the party whilst they were inside a drow submarine, as they were trying to prevent the arrival of this evil demon into the world. So it is a tremendous amount of fun. Now, my players have also written backstories. So I'm going to go and read those backstories. I leave for the castle tomorrow. And I'm going to go and read those backstories and look at how I can take those backstories and bring them to life, helping shape this narrative. So I've created this scenario. And we'll see how it unfolds. It's got to take 3 days. So my main approach is usually on day 1 is to get a sense of timing. So day 1, usually in the morning sessions. That's 4 hours from 9 until 1 or whatever it is. And in that, I get a sense of timing of the group. So I'm running 2 groups this time, one after the other. And so with group 1, I want to see what their timing is like. How quick do they respond? Do they work well together or do they not work well together? As an example of working well together, if you look at the Friday show, the Duskmourn Chronicles, which are 2 players that I've met at D&D in a Castle. I was so impressed with their role-playing skills. I said, please come and play at my table in London. And if you look at that group, if you watch episode 1 of the Duskmourn Chronicles, and I'm not saying that you have to go and watch episode 1 of Duskmourn Chronicles, but I'm saying if you watched it, that group to me feel as if they've been playing together for a very long time. They're very cohesive. They are incredibly neutral in terms of who's in charge. People can suggest things and the group just flows and washes around and they move as a flock rather than pulling themselves apart and going in different directions. And I think that that is a sign of group maturity, because when they do split apart, they split apart with the right reasons, and they're very careful when they split apart. It actually is probably a record for the amount of time that it took for the party to split. Now, I like split parties because the narrative moves faster and you have a much more cinematic experience bouncing between the different things that are busy going on. And this group took quite a long time to do an official split in the strictest of senses. And if you are watching that series, I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but there's a split that comes up. I think it's in episode 8, and you're currently on episode 6 is dropping this Friday. There's a split that was so significant that I wasn't sure how it was going to even resolve itself. I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure. Anyway, so with D&D in a Castle, it's about looking at how fast does that group move, how quick does that group move, what are they like, do they get together, do they work apart, are there too many leaders sort of vying and pulling and pushing and that sort of thing. And so it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Right, I see that there are some questions here, or a question anyway that's come through. And that is, we'll set them up at the Marriott Center. Your wife is the HR manager. Oh, well, there we go. Which is only 15 minutes drive from the castle. Look at that. Look at that. So, Mark Browning asked the question, what level do your players start and finish at? So, I think for D&D in a Castle, unless I'm greatly mistaken, they start at level 7. Why level 7? It seems to be a pretty arbitrary level. Well, I was convinced by some players, I think it was D&D in a Castle players actually, that level 7 is kind of the sweet spot for D&D specifically, 5th edition, because the mages have got access to 3rd level spells and I think also 4th level spells, and the warriors have got their powers. Everybody's got their shtick going on. Everyone's got their basic build that's pretty fun to play with, and that's also fairly versatile to different situations. It's also at a point where the player character sheet is not so long and so encumbered with 1,000 different abilities that the game slows down. So usually I'll start them on level 7, and then it's up to the players. If the players are going to spend the entire game role-playing, deep narrative exploration and politicking and building relationships, I beg your pardon, what do we care what level they are? So why would they go up levels? If the abilities, if the bonuses and all that kind of stuff is not really being used, and I've had that happen, leveling is irrelevant. On the other hand, if the party are actively pursuing the narrative, because we get parties, I get parties anyway, that some are incredibly objective oriented. And they go, oh, well, we've got to go into the investigation. Right, let's head on over to the investigation. Whereas others will drift around and do all sorts of other things. So usually the party will level up twice. I very seldom get the party to level up during a session. And this is more of a professional courtesy than anything else. Everybody who's at D&D in a Castle, and at my table anyway, all 6 of those players, they've paid a significant amount of money to be there. They have not paid a significant amount of money to sit at my table whilst they create or upgrade their character sheets. They also have not paid to sit there whilst somebody else spends 10 minutes or 20 minutes debating on whether they should take this one or that one. So when I do leveling up, it's usually at the end of the day, because I like to play in the morning and in the afternoon and then leave the evening free for other activities and all that sort of thing. So then leveling up can happen at night in people's own pace. So at best they would get to level 7, level 8, level 9 by the end of the campaign. But as I said, that maybe, it might be a case of, oh, well, you guys have done a huge amount. You fought dragons, you've done this, you've done that. Right, you level up at the end of lunch, you can level up your character. So that's generally what I do there. Another question, Villain for Life 1991 says, how does someone mechanically build an NPC villain enemy? I understand building it thematically, but how do I balance a villain? Choose spells, stats, legendary, and lair actions. Okay, so this is quite a divergent question in terms of, you're asking it of me. Now, when I create NPCs for my games, and I'm going to refer to the Duskmourn Chronicles, that's one of the reasons why I put it up there, is when you look at the Duskmourn Chronicles, I don't have any monster stats anywhere. I don't write down monster stats. I will keep in my head that this monster should be tough. So if it should be tough, the players have +5 to hit, my monster has +5 or +6. If the players are doing 2d8 damage, my monster's doing 2d8 +5. I want my NPCs and my villains and my monsters to be interesting to fight. But I also want them to be fighting for a reason. So if you're creating a villain and you're worried that the villain is going to be unbalanced, the question is, why then is the villain engaging with the PCs? If the villain could just kill the PCs because they've got superpowers and they're awesomely amazing, why don't they? I think the better question to ask is, the villain is not going to busy themselves with the little people, which is what a villain who's more powerful than the PCs would think of them as. So why not create a henchman that works for the villain, that is of the same level as the PCs, and that is going to fight the PCs in combat on behalf of his master? And it's only when the villain is ready and recognizes that the PCs have a potential power, a potential threat, that the villain then says, okay, now I need to step in and fight, and now I'm going to use my powers. This also comes from a lot of experience of running Dungeons and Dragons for 20 years. But generally speaking, I like my villains and things to be not malleable, not changing, not one day the Emperor shoots lightning from his hands, the next day he flies through the air, the next day... Oh wait, that is what George did. I like my villains to be consistent. Yes, they can grow in power, but that power needs to have come from somewhere. There needs to be a visible growth for that villain, just the same as the PCs would have grown and adapted. So that probably doesn't answer your question. Balance, I think, is a myth. I don't think you can ever balance a villain for a group of PCs. Whenever you look at the ideas of the CR ratings and all those kinds of ideas, it all goes out the window the moment the PCs come up with a cunning plan. So if the villain is just one creature and they have their standard 1 or 2 or 3 actions a turn, and you're fighting against 5 or 6 party members who've each got 2 or 3 actions a turn, that's 18 actions versus your 3. The balance in my head in Dungeons and Dragons is the equivalence of action count. It's not the equivalence of damage or spells or things like that. It's how many things happen in a round and on which sides. So that's really what I think of when I think of balancing combat and the like. Right. Steve C. question. Why can't Duskmourn Chronicles be 2 hours long? Steve, we did a vote on the community where I said, do you want it to be 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? Do you want it to just be a giant block of 6 hours? We record Duskmourn Chronicles once a month because the players, aside from one, are all training or flying in from different parts of the UK. That's how dedicated they are to playing this game. I really must take my hat off to them. So they have to book hotels, they have to fly out here, they get to sit around the table, they get to game. And so we do it once a month. And as much as I would love to be able to record 10 hours of D&D, if you watch Duskmourn, we are all giving it our 100%. Whether we want to or not, the energy around the table is just electric. Now, we recorded the next batch of videos this last Saturday, and I've got a video coming out, I'm not sure the exact release date, where I reflect back on the first 6 episodes and what I did right and what I did wrong. But this last Saturday was so emotionally draining that at the end of it, we finished recording, I think, at about 8 p.m. Everyone got here at about, call it 9:30 in the morning. 8 p.m. we finished the recordings. And I said to the players, I'm like, guys, you're here for the rest of the evening. Should we play some board games? Do we want to sit around and chat? And everyone was like, you know, my brain is dead. I can't play any board games. And emotionally, I'm drained as well. Let's all just have a drink, sit quietly, and reflect upon life. And then everyone went home at like 9:30. They were done. It was so much fun. But at the same time, the story was so intense between the characters. And what was happening as well, I can't wait for you to see those episodes. So the reason why it can't be 2 hours is because then in a 8-hour recording, we'd maybe get 4 episodes, and that's not enough to cover us for longer weeks or months. Like, for example, we'll be going to D&D in a Castle for 3 weeks. We can't record again until the 20th of April, so we wouldn't have enough shows to cover it. So that's the long answer, but that's what you get on this channel. Okay, next up, Farbenshock says, in D&D in a Castle, are there just players or also people just watching the game? So no, there are no observers. There are, how can I put it? So you can, as a couple or as a pair, I guess, book a room, and then you can come along as a spouse/companion, and you are allowed to do whatever you wish. You obviously are catered for, and you can do the other group activities like the archery or the escape room and that sort of thing. But you are not allowed to play at any of the tables. You are allowed to sit and watch if everybody else gives permission. Not everyone is comfortable having a stranger watching them play or vibing in. And some DMs might say, well, I don't mind if you watch, but you can't interject or participate because suddenly the DM is now dealing with 7 players rather than 6. So, for example, I remember with one of my D&D Inner Castle adventures, we had the one player, she was playing and her husband was a guest. And he would disappear for the day. He would go off and explore the ruins and other castles and all of the wonderful history around the area where the castle is set. And he'd come back for lunch and then he'd go off again and he'd come back for dinner and we'd hear about all of his exploits and things. And he'd hear about the, crazy adventures and whatnot. And I then got the very lucky fortune of becoming a GM for that group, hopefully for life. We meet once a year. We fly around the world, thankfully, due to generosity of the players, and we play a game once a year. And now the husband has joined in, and he's a great player. So that is a wonderful journey there, but there you go. So that's an answer to that one. All right. Okay, I've also added equipment purchases done out of game with a spread. Okay, I don't know what that means. Right. Questions from Contreras. Some years ago, I tried creating a homebrew world campaign. Tried to put too much in, too fast, and burn myself out. I want to try again, but scared of a repeat. Any ideas on how to start? Absolutely. Contreras, that's a great question. So, I wonder. Just give me a second here. Give me a second. I just want to see what that is showing. Okay, because, my business partner, the Web Goblin, is a genius. And I'm not lying. He's a genius. He might not admit it, but he's a genius. So I want to show you this Contreras. This is my world building. This is how I have wished to do world building forever. And the Web Goblin came along and said, oh, we can do that. Here we go. So this is the Goblin World Creator, which we have made. And currently it's featuring my world of Braxia. This is my homebrew world that I've been working on and off for 20 years. Now, this is the caveat. When I say working on, I have had players playing in this world for 20 years, and I have had players growing this world for me and with me. So, for example, up here, the original map did not have this area here. You can't see my cursor, but it did not have the Cathar Sodality. They just didn't exist. Until I had a player come along and say, hey, there's this new species that they're adding called the Tabaxi. They're cat folk. Is there anywhere in your homebrew world where the Tabaxi come from? And I went, there is now. There we go. We get the Cathar Sodality. And I drew it so that this kind of looks like the claw paw of a cat. And so does this side on the other side, the northern side. So I drew that in and I was like, okay, cool. Well, the Tabaxi in my world, Braxia is all about using existing ancient cultures. Because what I have found is that my players go, oh, I don't know anything about Tabaxi. And I go, that's fine. The Cathar Sodality is very much like the Raja period from India. Think 1500s, the Rajas that had the caste system, and then you've kind of got it. And people go, oh, okay, cool. So yes, I understand there's spices and possibly elephants and howdahs. And you go, yes, absolutely, draw on all of those tropes, but it's cats. So add that into the mix. And so what this Goblin World Creator does is that I start with a map when I'm doing world building. And I go, right, there's my big map. I have done a map. Bravo. I have thrown down some random names. There are some territories that don't have names. They've got names now because my players have said, I want to play a golem. An Iron Forged, because that was the thing in 4th edition. I think it was 4th edition. Okay, cool. Right, so 4th edition, right, this is where the Iron Forge come from. Oh, I want to play this. I want to play that. I want to play the next thing. Now, why does it only have a few of these flags? What do these flags do? So this is how I work. And I go, right. So I've got a write-up, let's say for Northern Brunei. So Northern Brunei stretches from Milken here in the north all the way down to Lorcan in the south. And this is Northern Brunei. So my flag is for Northern Brunei. And when I click on it, it opens up a basic description of Northern Brunei. But I can then embed a map. So then I go, okay, cool. So open up that map. And there is Brunei itself all the way from Milken down to Lorcan, as I said. And now I start to drop pins. And so I've got an overview. And so there's the overview that I wrote. I've got organization. So this is how it's organized. There's the High King and there's the current Queen is responsible for the North. Okay, cool. What is the crime and punishment? And what's the culture like? Notice that these are not 50-page long entries. These are a few paragraphs to remind me about what's going on. What are their unique trade things? They've got some guilds, they've got some grain. Okay, cool. Then I've got some cities here that have also got just some basic descriptions. Okay, fine, thank you very much. And then because it's me, when my players are running around in this area, if I've got time, I will then go, okay, cool, let me drop down a little adventure. So I write down adventures like this. So the Festival of Cathantis. And so the basic idea of the Festival of Cathantis is a lavish event held each year in Longwood Forest. It celebrates the blooming of the Cathantis flower and the arrival of spring. Druids gather from across Northern Brunei to take part in the week-long contests. That should be, is it hyphenated? I don't know if it's hyphenated or not. Festivities and reproduction rites. Now, I have always maintained that there are 4 types of adventures: thwarting, collecting, delivering, and discovering. So if I need an adventure on the fly and my party are somewhere in this area, I now know that there is the Festival of Cathantis. And I can say, well, the last adventure they were on was kind of like a delivery adventure. So let me just, let's do thwarting, because it's different. So it's going to have a different pace. And so I've made some notes. There's stalking the druids this year as an assassin, trying to eliminate all the druids from the Ghent-Moor region. Okay, Ghent-Moor, where is that? Oh, that's right next door. Okay, fine. The Moor is an increased number of undead, and the druids have been hard-pressed to keep them at bay. The assassin's primary target is the Ashkin, an important rank in the druids, who is particularly effective at getting rid of undead. Okay, right, boom. That's all I need. I've got my adventure, I've got my scenario, my players can now run around and start investigating. So this is the system that I use, and I just add to it slowly as I go along. So if we go to Southern Brunei, I know, for example, in Southern Brunei, if we go to Howdenlee, Howdenlee is a city that I have played in and burnt down I don't know how many times. If you have ever played with me and you played in a campaign, you've probably been part of the sacking and the destruction of Howdenlee. So Howdenlee, I have a map of Howdenlee. I have updated that map with this new map. So here it is here. And you can see I haven't finished. I've got places to put lore and who's the leader and all that kind of stuff if I really want to. But I don't have to, because this is stuff that is for me. So Tualis University, the cleric's tier. So this is the tier. So this is for me to remember exactly what is going on and to make little notes as I go. See, Tualis is completely empty because I haven't updated it yet. Don't rush yourself when you're world building. Make or find software that is going to help you. And if it's just a notebook, that's absolutely fine as well. I've set myself the goal, by the way, of updating a region once a month. So I do, sorry, for my Patreons anyway, I do 2 regions. So if you're a Patreon, patreon.com/greatgamemaster, you get this software free and you get all of these updates every month. Every month I release 2 updates, 2 locations. And that's all I do. But it's a lot of work. If you look at the amount of writing that goes just into this, we're on like 50 pages of text. Don't try and do it all at once. Do it over time. This is a year-long project for me. Does that mean that my players can't immediately start playing? No, of course they can. Let's go explore. Drop anywhere on the map and I'll go, okay, Centaurii. Do I know what's happening in Centaurii? I know that Naxxa is an abandoned prison because my players that went there once, but the rest of Centaurii ain't never been explored. I know that there are probably centaurs on it because Centaurii, it's kind of in the name. But that's it. And there's the stuff on the map that I added for fun. And what happens at Cassius? Not a clue. What about Troii? Don't know. So have fun exploring your world. Tasfarel, big thank you for that. I really appreciate that. You took some advice. Joining your table at D&D Castle is still on my bucket list. Well, absolutely. And I think that this is the thing with gaming. It's always with financial responsibility. So don't rush it. It will be there, and I will be running games for a very, very long time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be running games at UK Games Expo here in, well, not here, but in Birmingham at the end of May. I'm going to be running a whole bunch of Mage Hunter games. So if you want to play Mage Hunter or you want to come and hang out, I will be at UK Games Expo for the entire weekend. And if you want to be a GM, UK Games Expo will provide you with free accommodation and breakfast and dinner if you run 5 games for them over the course of the weekend. It's a pretty sweet deal. So UK Games Expo, go check them out. All right, so let's go back. I think I missed a question or two because I saw quite a few coming through after that. Steve C says, wow, how long do you play each month? 4 to 7 hours, 12 hours? Sounds like my group in the 90s. So we meet once a month. This is for Duskmorn Chronicles. We meet once a month. We get together around 9:30 in the morning and we finish at about 9 p.m. Maybe finish recording at 8. So we will record 8 hours. Is it 8 or 6 batches of 2? 2. Yeah, we record 6 hours. We play for 6 hours. And in between, we have little breaks and we've got to do some technical stuff because it's a video and we're recording it and that sort of thing. So it's only 6 hours and that's once a month. Now, I used to run games that were not recorded, but just for patrons. And that I used to do for 3 hours twice a week. So yes, I must admit I miss running those games for my patrons because they were lots of fun. At the same time, having all of that free time available allows me to focus on other things as well. All right, let's leave this now. This is Goblin World Creator. Find that on our Patreon. So let's just go back again. Okay, so on with the questions. And where are we? Lord Clifford says, hey guy, how do hostile or neutral NPCs stop talking if they want? What if PCs just wait for the next answer or keep asking questions? My very first question to you, Lord Clifford, is what does that NPC have to do? If you walk up to somebody and you ask them a question and they have something to do, they're going to say, I'm not answering that. I don't care. I don't know. Good day. Why are you talking to me? Leave me alone. And then they walk off to go and do whatever it is that they're going to go and do. Remember OGAS, occupation, goal, attitude, and stake. If their attitude is friendly and helpful and their stake is, say, low, that's a stake in their occupation and in their goal, then they might stand around and try and answer as many questions as they can. On the other hand, if their stake is very high, and that means that their occupation will come first and their goal will come second. So they will say, well, look, I'm very sorry. It's very nice talking to you, but I've got to leave. I've got a field to till or, you know, whatever to do. So I would look at OGAS to give you to provide you support on that. And NPCs should just leave if they're not going to ask useful or things along those lines. Right. Jonathan Stark says, question from a fellow DM. Hello, DM. I have DM'd for over a decade and I love it. Well, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. I always get a very strong positive response and feel very comfortable. But now I'm being asked to play in a game and I realize I actually struggle with being a good player. Any tip for a DM transitioning to a player? It is very tough. I myself am not the greatest when it comes to play. I will play in a one-shot. I will play in a short-term campaign. Could I play in a long-term campaign? I don't know. And the reason for it is that I love stories. I love stories that follow structure. I love stories that make sense. But I also kind of like knowing the bigger plan. And I like to see how it unfolds towards that bigger plan or away from it. That, for me, is the joy of role-playing. So being a player, the critical thing that I find is if I hyper focus on the role play component. And what do I mean by that? If I have a character, I will look at how do I make that character as real as I can in terms of their interactions with the other players, in terms of downtime, in terms of being a tool to engage with my fellow players. Let the other players worry about the plot and the story and the adventure details. I want to be there for the player characters. And I will also be sitting there listening to what the DM is saying, trying to read the room. And here is where I usually fall down, is I also try and use the pacing that I would be setting rather than the pacing that the DM is setting. So I will try and hurry things along. Again, if you are focused on the role playing of the character rather than on the machinations of the game, that helps. At least it certainly helps me anyway. But that's why I also can't do it long term, is because after a while I'm like, yes, okay, I've explored this character. I understand this character. This character is doing amazing and wonderful things, but I'm done now. And I am consciously aware that my character can't drive their own agenda, because then I'm writing my own story within the GM's world. And maybe the GM wants that. Maybe they're running a player-based campaign. But unless the GM has said, hey guys, this is a player-based campaign, if they're trying to run an epic campaign and I'm coming in and I'm bamboozling it by just overriding it, I'm a terrible player. So focus on the role-playing, focus on the group dynamics, focus on being the supportive character rather than being a driver or a leader kind of type character. Right, so that was that one. James Long says, I've been thinking... Oh, go away, mouse. I've been thinking of running a dark fantasy D&D 5th edition campaign set in Grim Hollow. Do you have any advice for running dark fantasy? Dark fantasy is... Dark fantasy is only dark if there are moments of comedy, or there are moments of hope, or there are moments of joy. And this is something that I think a lot of folks forget, and a lot of folks just try to make it grim, dark, depressing death, grim, dark. And after a while, grim, dark, grim, dark, grim, dark, grim, dark, grim, dark. Oh, look, more grimness, more darkness. Oh, whoa, more. It gets to becoming the norm. But if you have grim, dark, oh, look, it's a little deer, and it's beautiful, and it's helping another little deer, and that's wonderful. Oh, and there's a giant horde of undead that are wearing the skins of children coming towards you right now. It creates such an imbalance. It creates it creates the grimdark. And so if you look at setting books, if I look at a dark setting, like 40k, for example, Warhammer 40k, who's grimdark, there's got to be something in there. There's got to be some moment of joy and humor, and otherwise it just all becomes boring, in my humble opinion. So I look for what can I inject into it? Where's the hope? Where's the light to shine on all of this darkness? I hope that helps. I would say, and those of you that watch Duskmourn Chronicles, I would say Duskmourn Chronicles is a pretty dark series. I'm not going to give away any spoilers if you haven't watched it yet, but it's pretty dark, but it is filled with laughter because we need the laughter to make those horrors more horrific. Okay. Eric von Roxalot says, one thing I noticed, DMs have issues with when they go back to playing is not answering questions. Lots of rules questions or story questions DMs tend to answer as they would DM, not how their DM would. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Absolutely. I find myself frequently biting my teeth down when a player goes, I want to cast Fly, on a pigeon and then use that as lift to carry myself off the ground with a rope tied around it. Will that work or won't that work? And the GM is like, oh, well, let's look at the spell. Let's see what the spell says. And I'm like, well, we could do that. Yes, all right. Does anyone know how the fly spell works? No? All right, you're looking at specific verbiage. That's fine. That's fair. They look at the verbiage and then they go, well, yes, all right, fine. You can cast fly on the pigeon. And I'm going, but there's another important question. Where the hell did the pigeon come from in the first place? It's going to allow the mage to tie a rope around its leg. And have you ever tried to tie rope around a pigeon's leg? Do you know how thin and quite grimly brittle those little legs are? A rope ain't going to cut it. This pigeon, it doesn't matter if it's got the fly spell on it. It's a case of wings. Anyway, that's not for me as the player. The GM has made a ruling and has said, yes, you may. So there you go. Okay, right. William Mashtalier says, do you always run Braxia in the same continuity? So is Conodana still leading the Druids? That's a great question, William. Conodana, what a wonderful campaign that was. The answer is no. So what I like to do is, if it's the same party and they finish a campaign and they're like, oh, let's do it again. Let's play another campaign. And they want a campaign set straight after the one that they've just finished, then yes, obviously the continuity continues through. But what you're talking about is you are talking about the NPCs that populate this world. When I'm doing world building, I will very seldom design NPCs with my world building. Maybe the Emperor of the Sageti, or as he would be called, the Pharos. But the actual Pharos, what type of Pharos is he? Is he a young boy? Is he old? Is he wise? Is he wizened? Is he greedy? That will be completely dependent on the campaign. So in Duskmourn Chronicles, Howden Lee and the leaders of Howden Lee, the king and the queen and the prince, those are all brand new NPCs that I added in just for that game. Now, if you go back to Howden Lee and you're playing in another game with me where the focus might be more mercantile, well, then the leaders of Howden Lee are stewards and guild members. There isn't a king or a queen to be seen. So I hope that answers your question. Continuity, gods, locations, history, world vibe, that also grows over time as well. Right. So, for example, Conodana, just going back to this, just to harp on this point. In Conodana, their whole thing was about the dragons trying to return and retake Braxia and that sort of thing. The last two campaigns that I've played since then, one was set during the reign of the dragons, and it was about expelling the dragons into an alternative plane where the dragons didn't pull a twist. The campaign ended with the dragons be dead. And the other group were helping with that whole process, but seemed as if they were going to actually let the dragons go and carry on living. So that was that. And yeah, all right, fine. So there we go. I think for me, when I talk about world building, I know Howden Lee has 3 tiers. The civilian tier, which is slummy and full of brothels and dens of iniquity and is full of people. The next tier, Ulian's tier, is where the nobility live, the clerics live, the fancier shops are. And then the highest tier is Ulian's tier, sorry. Cleric's tier is the second tier. Ulian's tier is where the keep is and that sort of thing. So that if I know that this is the city, this is the layout of the city, when my players go in there, I can just have fun going, well, what would live in the lowest tier where the slums are? What are those kind of adventures as opposed to the clerics and Ulian's tier? Right. Okay. Nope. No. Ooh, I'm running behind. Where are we? Okay. So, Evil Mastermind says, when building a world, how to make technological variance amongst factions and locations without making one side vastly overpowered compared to the others, and why would they just not conquer all? You only have to look to our own world for that answer. And it's a simple one. Time. Time is a major factor. And bear in mind, technological advances in a fantasy world might not necessarily be the best. So, for example, in a world where mages exist and you can cast magic missile, which, this is a D&D for example, does not miss. A peasant who's got a flintlock musket, which was a major technological changer in terms of power balance within our own world, is not that great. It's not such a leap as it was for medieval history. Suddenly, a person who could fire a crossbow, which already started to see the destruction of plate mail, suddenly could fire a rifle, and that changed everything. Absolutely everything. You also have to look at it and say population size. As medicine improved, population sizes improved. Bigger populations, bigger battles, bigger armies, more technology to kill more people at once, because otherwise it just took too damn long. So balance out all of your factors. You go, well, this civilization has got airships. Great. Do you know that Sweden planted 100,000 oak trees and one sitting in the 1650s, or was it the 1750s? Why did they plant 100,000 oak trees? Because they were adamant that they were going to build first-rate ships of the line using oak trees, which is what the English had been doing for a very long time, which allowed them to dominate the seas. And by the time the oak trees had grown to maturity, ships were using steel for their hulls, and them oak trees, they're a pretty forest, and that's it. So your technology is always in flux. Another concept to add to your world building is leapfrog technology. Nigeria, for example, huge population, vastly underfunded, vastly undereducated. Basically just another African country. Cell phones start to become a thing. Now, everywhere else in the world had been using internet on computers and slowly catching up with the technological revolution. Not Nigeria. Cell phones arrive, mobile arrives, mobile internet arrives, and Nigeria suddenly wakes up. And like a slumbering giant goes from being a populous but backwater country to being the biggest economy on the African continent, eclipsing previous giant economies, because they just skipped a whole level. We don't have to worry about all of this internet infrastructure and blah, blah, blah. We're just going from no internet to suddenly everyone has internet. So where you have technological imbalance, look at how it can just be circumnavigated somewhere else. And then finally, all of the technology in the world still did not allow Napoleon to invade and successfully take over Russia. It didn't allow Hitler to successfully invade and take over Russia. There are certain geological things that just cannot be overcome by technology, and those can cause big barriers, major issues to develop and to occur, which is significant. That was Evil Mastermind. Okay. Farbin Shock says, do you have crazy sport events in your world? Yes, I do. I've got a few. So there is, if we go back to the world, the goblins, Pispin, Meineke, Pugglesnuff, all of these areas, they have ogre jousting. This is where goblins or halflings or anyone who's really small enough ride ogres into battle and joust. Frequently the ogres are naked, and oftentimes the actual jousting arena is covered in a jelly-like slime to make it that much more interesting. I've had players who've run off to go and participate in these events. The Drow Republic, which is obviously not represented in this map, they have a form of sport combat by trial type of thing, trial by combat, where they're suspended on these very elasticated spider webs in a circular tube, which has got viewers all around it, and they have to jump up and down using gravity to their advantage to fight one another, and change their hooks across to different cables as the cables are cut by their opponents. So there is that one. What else do we have? We've got golf played by the dwarves in the south, but that's just me being silly. And then we've got Jugger, which is, I stole that directly from a LARP that I once was involved in, where teams of armed soldiers fight over a skull of a beast, which they've got to get from one side of the field to the other. So I do have a few games like that. Then there's card games, there's some gambling games as well, but not a huge amount. And again, it depends on the players. If the players want to go into a sporting arena, for sure there is. I've got lots of gladiatorial arenas scattered about. Here in the Szigeti Empire, for example, Akataken, this great city next to Gregen, the dwarvish city, huge arena where massive combats take place on a regular basis. Here in the Kabalia, Hechbiovkor and Zagrash Kahoch both have arenas in the center of them as well. So, yeah, that's an answer of yes. Right, I'm loving these questions. Absolutely loving these questions. Loki95, sorry, where can we find Goblin World Creator? You can find that by joining our Patreon. That's patreon.com/howtobegreatgm. Now, you can load in your own maps, by the way, and you can add in your own world and your own pins and all that kind of stuff, obviously. There are still bugs. It's way in alpha at this moment, but it is available if you want to go and check it out. Okay, Villain for Life 1991, £5. Thank you very much. I appreciate that donation. I met you at UK Games Expo last year. I don't know if I'll be going this year, but if you're going next year, I'll look into joining a game. Fantastic. Well, I will probably be there next year. And so there you are. Okay, Meneldil asks the question, how would you revive the character's interest in the main quest? My players are currently branching out, like helping freeing a prisoner totally stranger to them. The question is not how do you revive their interest in the main quest or in the main story or the main plan of whoever it is that has put this thing into motion. The question is what is happening whilst the players are off doing these branch quests. If the main quest is to bring about the end of the world by sacrificing 55 elvish grandmothers on a Tuesday, and the players are still monkeying about on Monday, they need to know that Tuesday is coming, and the grandmothers have been collected. The sacrifice is about to begin. You can remind them that the quest that they're on is advancing, regardless of whether they're paying attention to it or not. But I have to ask this question first. Have you been educating your players that the main quest can be ignored whilst they explore side quests? As the GM, frequently we will throw in all kinds of side quests. And I know, seeding, the idea of throwing out plot hooks left, right, and center, I even still call them plot hooks, which I shouldn't do, but every single NPC's got something that they want done. If the players start to just disperse and you don't remind them that the big thing is still happening, then you as the DM are encouraging them to ignore that main plot whilst you are encouraging them to go and look on the side quests. You have to make sure that they as players are aware that it is continuing. If they don't, then they have no reason to go back, do they? So that's something to think about. And this is, by the way, this is subconsciously. We're not purposefully trying to train our players to go off on side quests. It's just that they're not being shepherded back, so they are learning the behavior. We have to be aware that this is what players do. This is not being condescending towards players. This is just humans seeing the pattern of, okay, I do a side quest, I get rewarded, I don't get punished, I'm going to do more side quests, if you want to look at it in that way. Okay. Afternoon. Barely warming up in Ontario, Canada. Yes, it was very cold here today in the UK as far as I'm concerned. Right. I'm just looking for questions. Greetings from Croatia. Greetings, Croatia. Right. Can a swallow carry a coconut? Well, Mr. Adam Power, the real question is it an African or a European swallow? As J4J Cypher very well says, absolutely. Right, I'm just looking for questions. There's lots of discussions going on, which is fantastic. I like that. Okay, here, Steve C. Question. Will there be Duskmourn Chronicles merchandise in the store soon? If by soon you mean in the next 6 months, yes. Sure. I've seen some folks saying, hey, we'd love a t-shirt or a hoodie or something. I will probably open up a poll here on YouTube in the community tab for what would you like. Some people go, oh, I don't really want a hoodie. I want a t-shirt, or I want a cushion cover, or I want this, or I want that. I have just been so busy finishing up the Mage Hunter rulebook. It's looking beautiful, by the way, as well as getting ready for D&D in a Castle and launching Duskmourn Chronicles. I've been a bit busy. Okay. Sledgehammer. Hello, Guy. Your How to Be a Great GM series helped me a lot. Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for saying so. Right. Yes, the 1989 The Blood of Heroes, says Big Sarge, is exactly where Jugger came from. The idea of footballers in a post-apocalyptic world that play with severed dog heads and were able to commit extreme acts of violence against one another. So there you are. Arson Carson says, hey guy, love the channel. Thank you very much. Question, I could not find advice for this. I want to GM a game with only 2 players. There are guides for GMing plus 1 player or a group of 4, but there are no guides for 1 GM and 2 players. Interesting. I will actually, right now, whilst we're busy, I have my list of GM videos. And let's see, I've done that. I make a list of what have I done, what haven't I done. And I'm going to add this to the list. Running a game for 2 players. 2 players is really interesting. And the key here is obviously the players. What kind of players are there? Is there a passive and is there a more dominant type of player? If they equally match, that's fine. Your job as the GM becomes making sure that there is an equality to those 2, because if it's just one following the other one, that can be fun. And if that's what the one player wants to do, absolutely nothing wrong with that. On the other hand, if it is 2 players and they want to get a game going, oh my goodness, so much fun. And when you split the party, the tension you can cut with a knife. So I'll be doing a video on that one, probably coming out in late May. So thank you for that suggestion. But yes, lots of fun can be had with a 2-player game. All right. And I think, hello, Morocco. Catherine Kirk. How are you doing, Catherine Kirk? I'm busy writing. Catherine Kirk hopefully will be the editor on our next book. Any tips for folks publishing written TTRPG content? Yes, the biggest advice that I have for you is you need to decide how serious you are about it. So if you're going to be writing 5th edition content, which, let's be honest, 5th edition content is where the money is at. Everybody is playing Dungeons & Dragons. 60% of the market is D&D. 60% of the market are purchasing products for their games. D&D is a massive engine. It's a massive monster. You might as well capitalize. But if you are just going to be doing it as a side hustle, something for a little bit of fun, a little bit of potential pocket money, then I would go with DM's Guild. They take 50% of everything that you earn, and they own the rights to your material. They can re-release it however they like. However, what that does is it gives you access to all of their basic material. It gives you access to all of their imagery and that sort of thing. So you can produce a really good looking document for virtually nothing but your time and your skill. On the other hand, if you are looking to make it a serious venture where you are willing to invest in some capital, then go the route of promoting it yourself. Amazon is not going to be your friend here. Amazon is not going to help you unless you are writing black and white books. This is you creating your own store, creating your own presence. And how are you going to promote that? You're going to go onto Reddit, you're going to go on Facebook, you're going to promote the hell out of it. What are your costs going to be? You're going to have some artwork in there. You want to go with AI artwork? Go ahead. But as someone who tried it and experimented with it on this channel, the blowback that I got was huge. We won't ever use AI art unless it can be proven that it has been ethically trained on artwork commissioned specifically for that AI, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So that's my basic advice, is decide how serious you are about it. Because if you want to own that IP, you got to go independent. Right. Last few questions, and then we will call it for the night. So many of you online. Remember to smack that like button if you're enjoying the content, and if you're enjoying hanging out with me, then I'll know to do more of these in the future. Right. Okay. Slente Martha. Slente Martha. I apologize for the pronunciation. Do you plan on publishing some Duskmourn Chronicles stuff like stat blocks or a campaign outline or a full-blown campaign? I have answered this in the video, which will be coming out shortly, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But the long and short of it is there's nothing to publish. I make up the stats as I go along. And in terms of the plan, you've watched episode 1. That's it. The rest is in the hands of the players. You know, my players even said to me, hey, would you like to know what we're planning? And I'm like, okay, would you like to know what my villain is planning? Their answer was an immediate, no, we don't want to know. So I was like, well, I don't want to know what you're planning either. How can I be a role player in my own game if I know what the players are planning? So what they came up with in our last session, I was like, yeah, that tracks. That's good. That's exciting. That's cool. And some of it was like, I didn't see that coming. And if I didn't see it coming, my villains didn't see it coming either. So how could they possibly have planned a counter move to it if they didn't anticipate it coming up? Well, they can't have. So that is the long and short of it, unfortunately. The Braxia setting book is coming eventually. I've got one more book which will be rolling out towards the middle end of this year, which is the Practical Player's Guide. Very excited for that one. That's how to be a good player. Companion to be the practical guide to becoming a great GM. And then after that is the Braxia setting book. So that, I suppose you could say, would be the campaign, although it's more, this is a cool world space, and here are a whole bunch of things that you can throw at your players and just go and explore. Okay. Farbenshock says, did you ever invent a language and was it worth it? Yes. The only language I have ever invented is plant speak. So there was an ability, I think the druids still have it, although I haven't seen it in a while. I spoke about this many years ago on the channel. When a druid speaks to a plant, plants don't have mouths. So you go, well, the spell allows them to communicate. And you're like, sure. So this teeny weeny little spell imbues a plant with intelligence, capacity to suddenly have linguistic ability. No. So plant speak is how a plant would communicate. It uses its branches, it uses its leaves, and it makes shapes. So it might go vibrations, consumption or consumption. And it's not a complete language. There's no rules on how it works, but you've got to do these weird hand gestures that may vaguely resemble a tree's branches. And my druids, whenever they use plant speak, and I'm suddenly going, greetings in the sun. That's a warm greeting. And the druids are like, how do we respond? I'm like, well, talk to it in plant. And my players are going, great gusts came through here. Did you see the beasts? Whatever they do, it's a lot of fun. It's a moment of lightness, and it allows for this abstract notion of plants communicating. And I love it. I love it. Okay, last two questions, and then that is it. So Eric says, there's a new RPG player for our group who has never played before. We've played a couple of campaigns and a one-shot, and it's like pulling teeth to get them to read, understand abilities, please help. They obviously don't want to. That's the bottom line. They might say, no, I truly, desperately want to play this game. I don't want to play this game. They want to be social. They want to hang out, most likely. If they are really struggling, then look at the role-playing system. Maybe it's time for a different role-playing system. Maybe you need one that is diceless, or maybe you need one that is based on iconography, like the Star Wars Fantasy Flight games, for example, or the White Wolf, werewolf, mage, and vampire books, which is based on pips. So not even on dice, it's pips and dice. Look at those kind of options, but most likely it's more about socialing. And if that's the case, if the character is much more interested in socializing and just role-playing and not really worried about the numbers and all that kind of stuff, super simplify it. Just give them one d20, give them a d8, which is the most likely dice that they're going to be using, a d6 if that, and that's it. Don't worry about it. Just let them go. Alternatively, if they really have a major issue, assign someone to sit with them and say, okay, cool, Brian, it's your turn. And Brian goes, oh, I don't know what, can I talk to it? No, we're in combat. Okay. And then the person assigned to them goes, right, Brian, so you can make an attack or you can cast a spell. Which would you like to do? Spell. Okay, these are the 3 spells that you can do. I would suggest this one because it does the most. And if they go, okay, great, then that means they're not interested in actually learning the rules or the mechanics. They're interested in the story and in the social ability. I wish I could be more positive on that one. William Mashthaler says, I have run a simplified D20 game and a system called Ryutama for younger players. Do you have advice for teaching children TTRPGs? Yes. So there are 2 options. One is you can go with fantasy, but then you can expect very bizarre, abstract things. It's fantasy. So as far as kids are concerned, well, if horses can fly, well, then they can walk through walls. The rules idea in a fantasy game is kind of incoherent. Why would you have rules in fantasy? This is make-believe. I can make up whatever I like. The alternative is to set it in the real world. This is where it becomes a lot more educational, in my opinion. If it's set in the real world, then the kids know, okay, I have to abide by real world rules. I can't just go and steal a car. I can't just jump out of the building and try and fly. So that's something to take into consideration. Another thing, I would also look at what the teenagers or the kids are fond of watching. Ask them, are you guys Marvel fans? Are you Star Wars fans? Are you DC fans? In which case you should slap them. Are you shouldn't slap children. Where are your interests? And then tailor it to that, because it's about giving context to the framework in which you are playing the game. Make it somewhere that the children are familiar with, and that will give them a structured approach, a structured support to it. And of course, if you don't know what they're talking about, go watch it yourself, because there's a lot to be learned from watching kids shows. I mean, they're just amazing sources of adventure opportunities. Steve C. Last question. Sure. Was the couple who were feeding the street urchins to the plants totally improvised? Absolutely. Steve, I don't know where anybody was going to go. I did not know what my players were going to do. So when they dashed off, and this is not really a spoiler, and they came across this couple, I needed a couple. I needed some tension. I needed some drama. And so they met the Doors. And the Doors evolved as they needed to, and as the tension needed to rise. The whole idea of episode 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 of the Duskmourn Chronicles was terror, pacing, and tension. I wanted the players to feel persecuted. And maybe I got that. I don't know. You let me know. Right. That was it. I think that's the only question there. Vaughn Gifford gets the last question because they highlighted my tag there. Do you ever do old school gaming like first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons? Do you? Do I? The answer is kinda. So at D&D in a Castle, as a matter of fact, this was the last time that I played old school. We did AD&D, not AD&D Second Ed. We did AD&D Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And to be perfectly frank with you, the system, when it came out, was amazing. It was mind-blowing. Second edition Dungeons and Dragons will always have a place in my heart. It was my first. And so I look back fondly and go, oh, I loved weapon and non-weapon proficiencies. I loved open closed doors. I loved percentile strengths. I loved this. I loved that. But to go back and play it, having now been educated as a gamer on these slick, codified, programmed games where there's balance, there's logic, there's intention, and yes, over time there's power creep, but that's a function of capitalism. But on the whole, there is a structured framework. AD&D didn't have that. AD&D had stuff being added onto it, and there was no idea, there was no concept of unifying game concepts across the realm. So when you play it, oftentimes you'll go, okay, cool, right, so I've got to do a this and a that. And then how does it resolve this? And you go, all right, well, in 5th edition, it would just be 1 roll, it wouldn't be 5. Let's go look at what the rules say, and the rules are quite poorly written. But we're here to old school it, we're here to have fun. So you spend a while looking through the books, which weren't indexed properly and whose layout was clunky, non-alphabetized. And then you find the rule and you're like, oh, they did that. All right, well, that's what we're going to do because that's what they did. But in future, we can just narrow it down. So, and I know a lot of people play the older school versions, but they often play them with an updated kind of rule set where the rules kind of stay the same, but they've done that codification, they've done that streamlining, they've keyworded things. So I do think that it would be interesting to chat with people who play those old school games and to find out what the draw is, what the appeal is, because really what you're discussing there is it mechanics over story, or is it story over mechanics? Because if it's story over mechanics, doesn't matter what you're playing. Doesn't matter. Anyway, folks, you've been fantastic this evening. Nearly 80 people. This has been a pleasure to sit here with you. I'm so glad that we did this. Maybe we do this once a month rather than doing the live role-playing, the live game shows. I did say I was going to talk about terrain, and so I'm going to hint. I've got to do this when I come back from when I come back from D&D Castle, because I said I was going to do it. I want to show you something because I've got it here. I must just reach for it. I want to show you this because it got me super excited. And I'm not going to say much more. You know I like and love my sci-fi. I know we've just finished with Star Trek, but this is a type of solo role-playing that I think we're going to have some fun with. I think we're going to have some fun. I mean, it's just so cool. Anyway, we're going to talk about that when I come back after D&D Castle. Until next time, I just want to thank you all for watching and to wish you all the very happiest of gaming.